Spare Parts is a interesting but pretty much forgotten 3D action platformer developed by EA Brightlight and published by EA. And this was a interesting game to say the least, and also the second to last game the development company ever made. I think I'll start my review off with one of the more glaring issues in this game, the fixed unmovable camera angle. While it wasn't always a big deal, I sometimes wanted to look in a different direction, especially since you were sometimes expected to see something off screen. It could get a little frustrating. Something else I found rather odd was that cutscenes did not have subtitles, but the game itself did. This was just odd and didn't really make sense, but whatever. Now, I must praise this game for something. I do appreciate the design of the robots in-game, and the art style was overall pretty enjoyable. It does really feel like the developers were definitely passionate about this game. But that being said, I just wasn't a huge fan of this title, and it does kind of pain me to speak negatively about it, because again, it really feels like a lot of passion went into this game. Discussing gameplay, this title is not very good in my opinion, and rather boring in addition to having really random, vague objectives at times. This game, as you can see, is a action platformer with some light puzzles sprinkled in. Had a brain fart there, my apologies. Platforming was generally pretty good. I mean, it's hard to mess up platforming, so not too much to say there. But combat was not very enjoyable. A ton of just pressing X. That's really the most effective way to deal with enemies. Just press X to punch over and over again. Now that being said, there were two enemy types which were a bit more sophisticated, being red enemy robots and battering ram robots. I don't know what they're called, but they charge and headbutt you, and they're a pain to deal with. The red robots were best dealt with using your strong arm equipment, and it was generally best to use your heavy attack, or pressing Y, to deal with the battering rams. Of course, you did have attacks outside of just punching. You had the aforementioned strong arm and heavy attacks. You could do jump slams. You had a ranged attack where you threw spare parts. I wonder if that's where the name of the game comes from. You could EMP some robots with the magnetic boots, light enemies on fire with your jetpack shoes, etc. But in a lot of cases, just mashing X was really the best way to deal with combat scenarios. I mention equipment here. Throughout the game, you collect equipment which is needed for various tasks. X-ray goggles, strong arms, jetpack shoes, magnet shoes, and tech arms, used for hacking computers, and each has their 3 upgrade tiers purchasable from the store using coins you collect throughout the game. Now, with combat and platforming out of the way, the puzzles could be a little tricky here or there, but where I really have an issue with them, and something I mentioned earlier, was you might not see if you solved a puzzle or not. E.g., you need to solve a puzzle in Area 1, but since you can't turn the camera to look at Area 2, where the result would be, you'd have to keep going back and forth between the two areas sometimes to see whether or not you got the job done. Discussing enemy variety, a lot of foes kinda felt the same. You had weak bugs on some of the earlier levels, some of which had ranged attacks, but most often you faced various robot enemies, some of which also had ranged attacks and some had armor, but they largely felt the same to me outside of the couple robots I mentioned earlier. Now this game has 2 boss fights, if I remember correctly, a really annoying spider boss, whose fight was extremely vague. I simply could not figure out what I was supposed to do, and ended up looking up a tutorial on YouTube. Props to whoever figured out that boss on your own, as you were expected to just do really random stuff that was not clear at all. Aside from the spider boss, you had the final, extremely repetitive robot boss. He had 3 levels dedicated to him and took over an hour to beat. And no, I did not mean sections. That guy has 3 entire levels dedicated to fighting him. His fight was very boring and just drug on and on and on, especially his second level where you just kept hitting him while his shield went down for a couple seconds. Normally, I'd try to get some boss fight footage for my videos, but these two bosses were just so bad I couldn't bring myself to suffer through them again. I know it might kind of seem like I'm bashing this game a bit too hard, but this is how I feel about Spare Parts. I don't know, maybe I just went in with too high of expectations, but I overall really didn't enjoy this game, although I probably would have liked it a bit more as a kid. On a somewhat positive note, you can actually change your robot's outfits from the main hub, although I literally didn't realize this until the very last level, as the costume changing station was in this really random place that you'd have to go way out of your way to search for. The soundtrack to this game was meh at best, and the sound effects were okay, with the single voice actor being pretty good. Overall, I give Spare Parts a 5.5 out of 10 by my grade scale. Not a very enjoyable experience, but at least it was only $10 and relatively short, taking less than 6 hours to beat. Now, this game did not receive a physical release and can no longer be purchased on Xbox, and I don't know if it's still obtainable off the PS3 store. If someone could tell me about that down in the comments, it'd be much appreciated. I don't really have many similar games to suggest here, but maybe check out Alice Madness Returns or Epic Mickey Rebrushed if you're looking for a better 3D platformer. Anyways, that is all from me for today, y'all. For anybody new to my channel, I mostly play, review, and discuss zombie and horror games, with sometimes other topics like today, so feel free to check out some of my other content if that maybe sounds interesting. Thanks for watching, y'all. It really does mean a lot. Always remember that God loves you all very much. Have a blessed day. Peace.